Welcome to another edition of our Beat Diabetes Books and Quotes series that we're doing every Sunday, at least for a while. And we're going to go right back to the book Protein Power. This was written back in 1995 or 6 and was way ahead of its time. And they talked about all the things you've been hearing about recently if you've been just caught up into the keto low-carb movement, things like hyperinsulinemia and metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, and how just bringing blood sugar down, especially if you're doing it artificially, is not enough. You've got to bring the insulin levels down as well. Now, on today's edition, I'm going to quote the Big Mama. This is probably one of the quotes I have mentioned more than any other quote, probably my number one. So get ready. This is a big one, and I got this in bold markings. I like to mark my books. That's why I don't like ebooks too much, because you can't, I know you can highlight them, but I kind of like to get a marker out and just mark it up. Anyway, here we go. In the appropriate amount, insulin keeps the metabolic system humming along smoothly with everything in balance. In great excess, it becomes a rogue hormone, ranging throughout the body, wreaking metabolic havoc and leaving a trail of chaos and disease in its wake. Well, I like that for two reasons. Number one, it's a powerful truth we all need to see. That's the most important reason. I also think it's good writing. I like the way he phrases all of this and puts the words together. I'm a bit of a writer myself, and I always appreciate good writing. What he's saying is, in the right amount, insulin is very, very good. You need it. You got to have it. If you don't believe that, ask a type 1 diabetic who makes no insulin at all. And they wish their pancreas would make insulin, but it doesn't, so they have to inject insulin. So in the right amount, it's a gift from God. It's perfect. It's needed. It's a good deal. It's a good guy. But in excess, he says, it becomes a rogue hormone. It goes over to the dark side. It does almost more damage than it does good. In fact, it does a lot more damage than it does good. So you don't want a lot of insulin. You want the proper amount of insulin. And the problem is, when you become insulin resistant, your body's going to have to produce more insulin to keep up with the carbs that you eat and the sugars that are in your blood. And you become very inefficient when it comes to processing carbohydrates and dealing with blood sugar. When you were young, you were efficient. Our body was a lean, mean carbohydrate processing machine. We were extremely efficient at processing carbs. You get older, you lose efficiency, and if you've got diabetes, you've lost a lot. Type 2 diabetes. If you've got type 1, you're in worse trouble. So, here's another quote, and I like this a lot. He says about hyperinsulinemia, which is the condition of having too much insulin constantly in your blood. It's not a big deal to have a slight insulin rise when you have a slight glucose rise. But when your body is filled with too much insulin, day after day after day, week after week, year after year, it's a problem. He says all you need to do is treat the hyperinsulinemia and the other disorders that you may be experiencing, the various symptoms and manifestations of diabetes, he says will disappear or greatly improve. Now, the second part of this quote is what I really like. He says, the only method available to treat hyperinsulinemia is diet. That's it. There's no pill you can take to treat hyperinsulinemia. There are some things you can take to lower your blood sugar. You can take insulin, and you'll get that blood sugar down. In fact, you may get it down too far. But there's no pill you can take. There's no shot you can inject that's going to deal with hyperinsulinemia. All right, so there's no available method or treatment for hyperinsulinemia. He says, fortunately, the dietary approach works spectacularly well. I like that. The dietary approach will deal with it, not just a little bit. It works spectacularly well. And that's why when you deal with blood sugar by diet, by a low-carb diet with time-restricted eating thrown in, you're dealing with the insulin. That's why I don't always have to mention insulin when I'm talking about, well, let's get those glucose numbers down. Let's get that A1C down. Let's get that fasting glucose down. A lot of people criticize me and they say, oh, Dennis, don't you know the problem is insulin? But when you're dealing with glucose according to diet and time-restricted eating, you are dealing with insulin indirectly. You don't have to say insulin all the time. You don't even have to think about insulin all the time, but you are dealing with your insulin problem as well as your glucose problem. Now, if you're just taking a pill to try to lower your glucose, you may be dealing with the glucose, but you're not dealing with the insulin. And that's why just a pill is not enough. You're taking a shot to deal with the glucose. That's not enough. The dietary approach is the only way to deal with too much insulin, which is causing you all kinds of problems. But it works spectacularly well. Well, to wrap this up, I want to share about an experiment. Those of you that love dogs, and who doesn't love dogs, may find this a bit troubling. But this happened in the 1960s. I don't think they would allow this today. But they had a research team led by a Dr. Anatolio Cruz, who injected dogs with insulin in one leg, not a lot of insulin, but a small amount of insulin. I guess it was doggy insulin. And in the other leg, he injected them with saline. So an insulin shot in one leg, small amount, every day, and the other leg, a saline, a salt injection. They did this for 7 months, or almost 8 months, a little over 7 months. On examination after the 7+ months, it says the arteries injected with the insulin were found to have a pronounced accumulation of cholesterol and fatty acids, along with a thickening of the inner arterial lining. The opposite arteries, the ones injected with the salt solution, remained normal. So the leg that was injected with insulin got essentially hardening of the arteries, increased cholesterol in there, it became a mess. But the leg injected with the salt did not. Again, insulin becomes a rogue. It goes over to the dark side when there's too much of it. And the problem for most diabetics is not your pancreas isn't producing insulin. Your problem is you can't efficiently handle the insulin your pancreas is producing. So there's a message to the pancreas, more insulin, please. And after a little bit, hello, pancreas, more insulin, please. It's dumping out insulin far more, maybe twice as much, 3 times as much, 5 times as much, 8 times as much as normal, trying to keep up with all the carbs and sugars. You're not efficient any longer. You're not 22. Hello. Well, the smart thing to do is quit taxing your pancreas so much and lower the insulin levels. You'll be lowering the glucose levels, and all will be well. If you've recently been diagnosed with diabetes and you've just discovered this channel, let me recommend that you go to our Uploads page, which will give you access to every diabetic video we've posted since we began. As you work your way through all our videos, I believe you'll find the help you need. A link to our Uploads page is in the description.